And I've
Hey everyone, and welcome to the Free Assange Vigil. This is our 60th week in a row of bringing these to you. The Free Assange Vigil has now lasted longer than 98% of all celebrity marriages. My name is Steve Boykinen. I will be your host. I am joined by my co-hosts and good friends, Misty Winston and Andrew Smith. And before we bring in this evening's guests, Daniel Burke and Fiorella Isabel, let's run through the numbers. Today marks 3,548 days of illegal and arbitrary detention for Julian Assange, 502 days since the WikiLeaks founder was trafficked from the Ecuadorian embassy after being sold to the United Kingdom for a $4.2 billion IMF loan. Julian has been held without charge since the 24th of June of this month, which totals 63 days. 12 days remain until the second phase of Julian's extraordinary rendition show trial, which means we're less than 2 weeks from getting on a plane, or I'm less than 2 weeks from getting on a plane. 1,180 days of incarceration in federal custody for reality winner. And on the plus side, we are now on day 161 of Freedom for Chelsea Manning. And Chelsea has been streaming on Twitch 4 times a week, Thursday through Sunday. So make sure that you stop by, send her some love, and just let her know that she's appreciated. And with that, I will kick it over to Andre for this week's call to action.
Yeah, so we have two call to actions out right now. One of them we're going to be running through the trial itself, and I'll drop that link in chat right now. It is demanding that the hearings actually be heard. The short of it is journalists have a very hard time connecting via phone to Julian's trial. So we are reaching out to different complaint departments within the UK's prison and court system to demand that that system function properly so international observers can listen into the court proceedings. The second one, which is our official Week 60 action, this has to do with reaching out to different departments of the United States government, just demanding that the charges be dropped against Julian immediately. Included in there is the U.S. Pardon Attorney's Office. So I would like everyone to send a special specific email to that office demanding that Julian receive a presidential pardon because should be charged with absolutely no crime. But with that, I do want to introduce our very two special guests. We have Daniel Burke, who's running for U.S. Senate out in New Jersey, and we have Fiorella Isabel, who is a wonderful activist and host of Combo Couch. How are you today, Fee?
Good. I'm doing great. Yeah, it's tired, but yeah,
Wonderful.
very good.
Thank you for joining us. And how are you, Daniel?
I'm great. I'm really glad to be here.
Cool. So as we get started here, we had some really interesting things happen today on Reddit in regards to an AMA that was going on with Bill Binney. So if you could, Daniel, could you talk a little bit about what you guys were going over and then the response you got from Reddit?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm happy to say that I've been able to do a number of campaign events with Bill Binney, and I've known him now for several years. I met him through the Schiller Institute, of which I'm a member, which is the organization headed by Helga Zepp LaRouche, the widow of Lyndon LaRouche. And Bill, since 2017, early 2017, he's been putting out more and more forensic evidence demonstrating that there was absolutely no Russian hack of the DNC. And I know that you and your viewers are no strangers to that evidence, that he goes through the nature of the last modified times of the emails that demonstrates they had to have been downloaded rather than being hacked. They had to have been downloaded to a storage device, an FAT, file format storage device. And he goes through the fact that Sean Henry at CrowdStrike said that there was absolutely no direct evidence that these files were exfiltrated. What's the word? I'm losing it right now.
exfiltrated, I think, something like that.
Thank you. That's it. And so he was gone basically in the past period, I've been really committed to breaking this story with Bill, and not just this, but the whole content of his fight against the surveillance state. And there's been a major response to what he's been doing recently, which has been a lot of it in cooperation with the Schiller Institute and people associated with it. And what we attempted to do today was to actually have an Reddit Ask Me Anything thread in which Bill was going to be open to any type of question that was posed to him. So we set it up officially through r/IAMA, and they sort of begrudgingly let us put this together while making a strong sort of suggestion in their opening post, right there first, the moderator comment that came right underneath, that this could be disinformation. So if it goes in that direction, then we'll take care of it. And then within about 24 minutes of Bill beginning to answer questions about the actual facts of the matter that are, of course, directly related to Julian Assange's situation presently, they just closed it, and they made a completely ridiculous claim that that Bill was not presenting evidence for his claims, and that this was becoming a vector for disinformation, and so they shut it down.
If I could, I actually want to read the statement that they put at the top of the AMA thread. They said, while this is and this was the moderator team. They said, while this is a fascinating topic from a notable public figure, the mod team would like to remind everyone not to believe everything they read on the internet. Normally, we hesitate to allow an AMA with a topic like this at all, but Mr. Binney meets our notability qualifications better than most, and he has the support today of a U.S. Senate candidate. Consequently, we think it is important we offer them this platform to share their views. That being said, we have a policy against disinformation being shared on this subreddit. We won't hesitate to remove harmful disinformation if it's posted by the OP or users, particularly if it's harmful to the innocent people or participants, or spreads incorrect information about elections and voting. We also encourage all users and AMA participants to review Reddit's site-wide rules carefully before posting. It would be quite easy to let this AMA venture into territory that would get it shut down by the Reddit safety team. And then as they were shutting it down, they put an edit on that post and said, edit, OP is making very bold claims with insufficient proof. This AMA has devolved into a significant vector of disinformation. We have removed and locked it. So this is a very in-your-face version and in-your-face censorship that's just put forward, to where they even said, opening up, like, hey, don't believe this, like, by our rules, we kind of have to let this guy talk, but then maybe we'll shut it down.
The Ministry of Truth came down, and the Ministry of Truth decided that this particular kind of speech is verboten.
Well, here's my problem. Why is it okay for Rachel Maddow to fearmonger about Russia turning off their heat in the wintertime? And why is it okay for Chris Cuomo to tell everybody that it's illegal to look at WikiLeaks, and so you should only get your information from mainstream media? Why? I mean, come on, mainstream media lies, and
state sanctioned conspiracy.
No,
good though.
That's what they do. I mean, come on, y'all. They helped the Pied Piper situation with Trump. They propped him up, but that's okay. But Bill Binney can't hold a freaking Reddit and show actual proof and evidence and go into detail, and it's fucking crazy, you guys.
You should talk to Pasta about doing a combo couch AMA just to see if you can get it shut down. Oh, you're muted.
You're muted, Fee.
There. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay. We probably would. I mean, this goes back to a lot of people don't pay attention to this. A lot of people in the progressive left, I consider myself a leftist. I have very libertarian views when it comes to our civil liberties, however. And I just think that not enough of the progressives pay attention to that. Especially when people like AOC are out there kind of asking for more security, more surveillance in an effort to say, well, we want to make sure people are getting the right information. And the reality is that they don't want people to get the right information. You can't, who is to decide what the public should know? It should definitely not be corporations or private companies, but it should also not be the government. Because we know that our government is directly tied to special interests. So, at the end of the day, it would be private entities deciding what we should hear. And when it comes to Russiagate, we all know it was a hoax. But like Misty mentioned, Rachel Maddow gets to talk about this entire conspiracy theory that she said was a conspiracy theory to not believe in it. So it depends on who holds the power. And so I think we need to see more people talk about how our civil liberties are being infringed upon, especially when you see a journalist like Julian Assange, especially myself, like the way they arrested media in Los Angeles months ago. And now the police are getting hit with lawsuits, the way that they're gassing and at protesters and media, they're taking their equipment away. All of these things, like, they seem so disconnected from supporting somebody like Julian Assange or even having like the freedom to have a Reddit discussion, but they're not. They're all connected and they're all part of our democracy, because if we don't have access to that information that is truthful, or if we don't even have the ability to have the journey to discover what is truthful or not, then we're not going to ever get that information, and we're going to have the public be completely ignorant, which is the entire point and how they maintain the system.
And another big problem that we've seen in the last, I don't know, probably decade or so, is the use of social media campaigns by intelligence agencies to manipulate public opinion, to build higher levels of anxiety and anger, and to take underlying discord and social traumas and build them into controlled situations for security theater, while exploiting those people at the same time to try to get their technocratic agenda through. So it's horrifying to see so many different elements of the intelligence communities working together in conjunction with places like Reddit, to where literally just this simple thread that was going on a page of Reddit that has 20 million followers is so powerful that these people feel like they have to remove it simply to hide the fact that they lied to everyone for the last 4 or 5 years now.
If I could say that, in a certain sense, it's even more terrifying right now, because on account of Russiagate, the relationships between the United States and Russia, and then associated things that are being done between the United States and China, these two relationships are at a total nadir, and there's a dangerous threat that we're going to sleepwalk into thermonuclear war. And that's the real thing that's at risk here, is that we could lose humanity if we continue in this direction. I think there's something really interesting on this, which goes to the question of the Trump administration as such. Binney met with Pompeo in October 2017 at the request of Donald Trump. Pompeo was CIA director. And he sat down with him and he gave him the evidence that he attempted to present today on Reddit. And Mike Pompeo did the same thing that the Reddit guys did. He basically shut it down. He didn't allow it to get any further. And within days, he was repeating exactly the same thing that, Clapper and Brennan and everyone else was saying. And so you have this shutting off of the ability to actually, prevent this kind of collapse in relations from happening. And we have to find some way to move a flank. We have to somehow get this story to break significantly enough that it cannot be avoided.
Well, the biggest problem, I think, is you have Robert Mueller and Bill Barr, who are old buddies when it comes to cover-ups and intelligence operations. If you look back at the BCCI banking scandal during the Iran-Contra era, it was actually William Barr and Bob Mueller that sat together hand in hand to mitigate, to spin and control the investigation to find no real evidence, essentially. So the problem is that there's so many neocons that are just built into the system at this point, appointed and unappointed, elected and unelected, that hold so much power that breaking through, at least in the administrative level, seems like it's almost impossible at this point.
Well, you know, what we're, I just think that what we're accountable to is something that's quite global in nature. And there's actually, you know, naturally, we're talking about the threat of world war. In fact, in my view, that's absolutely present and really significant to discuss. And if this is going to go in the direction it needs to go in, then I think that there will have to be significant international response to what activists are doing in the United States to actually change the nature of this, you know, of this surveillance state, to break it. Because I think there's a clear reason that there's this constant demonization of Russia. It's heavily pushed by, for example, British intelligence services, who really were heavily involved in setting up Russiagate. And there's an effort of divide and conquer in the whole world, when if we actually pursued policies of mutual cooperation, you know, we could solve the great problems of the world right now. And it looks pretty clear to me that Putin and Xi Jinping want to actually have this kind of mutual respect and peace. If you look at what Putin's been doing over the past 6 months, for example, calling for a P5 summit between the members of the UN Security Council. So I just raised this because since the corruption in the United States is a matter of this secret government, shadow government, surveillance state that Bill Binney is opposing, that Julian Assange opposed, it actually has an international, you know, significance, because there's no possibility of world stability without getting the U.S. back into some kind of a positive relationship with those other countries.
And right now, we don't have well, there's like two different ways, two different avenues of approach you can look at that as. And one is we get to have this sort of, the U.S. at least gets to enjoy this sort of compartmentalization when it comes to British intelligence, where we can say, well, that wasn't us, they largely played a part in it. And we know that's bullshit, because we know that there's a Five Eyes intelligence sharing network, and that's the former UK colonies. It's the UK, Australia, Canada, New Zealand, and us. And their information, their intelligence is our intelligence. If we had some sort of, I don't know, even like spy network open with China, then we would be already at the table with China, because we would have skin in the game, because we would be swapping intelligence with them. We would have these long-standing agreements. I think the Five Eyes goes back to post-World War, or yeah, just post-World War II. So there's that aspect to it. Like we, instead of oligarchs getting together to collectively screw over the planet as, you know, oligarchs hand in hand, it's this battle of sociopathic pedophiles that we seem to be enjoying here in the West. And until we can kind of decouple the citizenry from the grip that these intelligence networks have over all aspects of our daily lives, from the media that we're forced to consume to the products that we're forced to consume, we're going to have a hard time attaining anything that looks like a piece that would represent regular working people, instead of a détente whereupon oligarchs can stockpile weapons and use them as leverage, which is basically what we've had, I don't know, since World War II.
Well,
I'm still kind of scatterbrained from all like being a fucking evacuee, so I'm not sure if that even made sense.
It does, and I understand, and I mean, good luck with the situation there. But allow me to suggest that the following is the fact. we have been in this disastrous period since World War II, basically because instead of Henry Wallace, we had Harry S. Truman. And Truman drops the bombs, which is the initiation of this, era of terror, which is effectively the mutually assured destruction era, shortly thereafter. And as long as we've been living under that world of the threat of thermonuclear war and the possibility that the United States or another country would use them on population centers, since we've proven that we will and that we have, then you have a condition where there's no sense of the common aims of humanity. It's not possible to think about the common aims of humanity if you live in that oligarchical mindset, because you think my interests and your interests are necessarily in opposition to each other. And so, I mean, the key here is that, to my mind, is that if we can unlock what's powerful in what Bill Binney is doing and what Julian Assange has done, what Snowden has done, then it means that you could actually, or perhaps maybe the way that we could unlock that would be to give people a vision of what the world should be like. I mean, I can't believe how brainwashed people are about Russia and China when you imagine that we could be working with China to build high-speed rail all across the world. We could actually solve the pandemic crisis, which is hitting the Southern Hemisphere much worse than anywhere else. And, we could lift up the US economy in that process of actually collaborating for the benefit of mankind. If we could give enough people, my view as a candidate, as a political activist, is that we need to give people a sense of what the world could look like in 50 years. And then they might get the deeper significance of Assange's case.
Well, that's really kind of the problem, though, with the fact that we are actually, like Steve said, run by, psychopathic pedophiles, is that, not only are they trying to limit our, ability to access information or, whatever, they're also trying to limit our ability to hold power to account. And the problem that really, arises is that people are kind of missing the bigger picture as to all of this censorship and how it's been, kind of slowly chiseling away at, our ability to communicate and, to, just know the truth. And so there's like this bigger picture where, people are not recognizing that each time one of these things happen, each time, a Reddit is, shut down, that's another step towards, just a real, it frustrates me constantly. I talk about it all the time. I can't find the words to get people to understand how genuinely dire this is, like the situation we find ourselves. And so, it's just really frustrating that, I don't know. It's just such a, it seems so obvious, and yet it's very difficult to get people to understand how bad it is.
Sophie. Oh, no, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Well, I mean, first of all, I have really profound respect for those of you who have been doing 60 weeks of vigils. I have really profound respect for what you're doing, because I know how much that requires of you. To have the spiritual and mental strength to make that happen, and to maintain a faith in that the arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends towards justice. Because I believe that is absolutely the case. And the interesting thing is that because the Reddit thread got shut down, then all of a sudden we got a huge response to it. And now there's going to be another subreddit actually reached out to us and said, and moderators of another one, and said, we saw what happened, we'll host it for Bill Binney, and you come into this. And it's about a 20th the size of the other one, because that's such a huge thing. But it's going to be on Thursday at noon, and I think a lot of people are going to hear about it through this. And so people get like incensed at the fact that what was there all along, this terrible injustice, suddenly and poignantly becomes clear, and we got to use it.
Sophie, I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about the censorship that you've experienced as an independent content creator and someone that covers issues that break the narrative.
Yeah, I mean, we have been shut down. We were covering election integrity in particular. And that was on Super Tuesday. And they completely took the video down when we were talking about the machines. We interviewed poll workers beforehand and during the whole live stream. We were on the ground. I was on the ground reporting what was happening. And it was in YouTube's own, I guess, fine print that it said if you mention anything about election integrity or election fraud, yeah, they are going to remove it. And so that's what YouTube does. YouTube is owned by Google. I mean, this is a problem we have here, that our voices are more important than ever, but they're being shut down by those in power because of the information getting through. You could talk about TikTok too in the same vein. China having our access to TikTok and our data doesn't worry as much as the United States and these private entities having it, because we're the ones that spy on people. I mean, Facebook, Cambridge Analytica, we could talk about all of that. And so it just feels like, to me, we have to, as creators and as journalists and as civil, citizen journalists, we have to create our own mediums. That's why I tell people, like, go on alternative sites to YouTube, start building other areas, because at any given moment now, YouTube came out with the WikiLeaks little fine print there too, where they can, if shut down anything that you put from WikiLeaks, anything they deem that is false, to protect the security of the CIA, let's be real, they're going to shut down. And so we have to start worrying about that. And I think to the point of what Misty said, like, it's frustrating that enough people don't care about it. Well, people don't care about it because they're so busy being focused on all these other things that are happening. And unfortunately, human beings, unless there's an immediate concern, they don't really see it. So the more people like us talk about it, people like you guys, like the whole Reddit thing being shut down, like, that is true. Just like Donald Trump's presidency, with bringing out the ugliness of everything, like bringing out how bad everything is, how little liberties we really have, how little freedom we really have, that is causing people to counteract to that. So I think the more they come down on independent media, like myself, like you guys and others, the louder we have to get, and the more we have to fight back. And it's really frustrating when, you get demonetized. When I mention anything foreign policy wise, imperialism wise, you get demonetized. We have to let people know. We have to be a broken record and continuously talk about it, because sometimes people think that this is minimal, that it's not as important. Oh, well, you got a video taken down, or you got demonetized, or Richard Medhurst got his demonetization taken away, Progressive Soapbox got his whole channel taken away, but then they talk about it and you get it back, or something happens. That's what has to happen. There's no other way for us to fight, because we don't have the power, and the only way to get the power is to make our voices louder and continue to really talk about it, and kind of shake people into, like, hello, if you don't have your freedom of speech, if you're not able to get the right information, you're not going to have that information, and you're going to think something like Russiagate is real when it's not. And so I think it's so important that we have conversations like this.
One of the things that we've always tried to get across on the vigil here, and on my show as well, is that if we don't have access to a free press, we don't have a free press, we don't have the ability to view primary source materials that are unspun, if we can't, as individuals and as private citizens, look at the raw data and decide for ourselves how to feel about it or what to think about it, then no matter what it is you advocate for, no matter what your cause is, no matter what your activist organization or your institute or your foundation is, it's a doomed fucking enterprise. We have to have this, put the free speech and a free press is the cornerstone by which we build everything else around us. And if that gets taken away, it all collapses.
So one of the things that scares me the most, right? You've seen it with Alex Jones, you've seen it with other content creators. When they get removed, there's this mass audience of people that cheer. And then there's this group of people that fight back to try to get them restored. And sometimes the bring the account back people are louder than the this should have been removed people, and the account comes back. What I'm concerned with as this escalates through society and it becomes more and more and more acceptable is it turns from censoring a channel to arresting a creator, where they say, Alex Jones has been arrested for sharing information or because he's dangerous to the public health or something like that, where he gets swept up. And then it's people like us here now fighting to get that person out of jail versus the people that are arguing he should still be in it. And that's the scariest future to me, because that's the one where information is determined by the algorithm and what they're able to make you outraged about.
Well, and we saw that's where it's heading in that Shadowgate doc in Millie Weaver's movie. I don't know if either of the guests tonight watched that. I would encourage you to go watch it. I'm not a fan personally of Millie Weaver's politics, but the information, at least the information that is verifiable in that documentary, is fucking staggering. Like, she did a great job putting that all together. And we know from that doc that there's a thing that is marketed as the shadow net, which allows private companies, private intelligence groups, and public intelligence organizations to individually target people, to target groups, and to figure out what they can send their way to gin up a certain kind of outrage and achieve a certain kind of result. And that is, like, I'm not trying to get woo-woo or anything like that, but that's living in a fucking simulation. That's what it is. When algorithmically you are predestined to react a certain way, that's your own personal agency, your own self-determination being taken from you. And I think that we all need to, we at least need to be conscious of that and be aware of the fact that we can be manipulated. That if you find yourself getting like really eggy because of something you saw on the internet, take a step back and be like, do I really feel like this, or am I being pushed to feel like this? You know what I mean? But again, I could be talking fucking crazy here. I don't, like, it's been...
No, that makes total sense though. And I think what people need to remember is that the people in charge of all this stuff, like we already mentioned, are psychopathic pedophiles. Like, do you guys really want those people in charge of what kind of information you're allowed to see? And I mean, I just read an article, I don't know, maybe last week, where they were talking about how Google and Facebook and Twitter and all of these places got together with the government to figure out a way to best combat election interference. And my friends, that is election interference. That act right there of all of these tech companies meeting with the United States government to discuss how to disperse information during an election season, that is election interference. And that's terrifying. And I don't know why people, are, just kind of, and I get, like Fee said, everybody's got shit going on. There's a lot going on right now. There's a fucking lot going on right now. But I mean, I've just always, like Steve said earlier, to me, this is probably the biggest issue that we face. This is the front line of every other battle that we face, because freedom of speech, freedom of, truth and information is, how you fight every other, it's how you get healthcare. It's how you get, education. It's how you get, a living wage. It's how you fight the establishment. It's how you can't fight on, with them controlling the narrative, and that's not possible. We have to fight this fight before we can fight any others. I don't know if that made any sense at all.
I just wanted to add real quick, like, one of the things that we have to do to get there is to really, the hyper partisanship is a problem. Like, a lot of people on the so-called left were cheering when Alex Jones was censored, and that's a problem, because as much as I don't agree with anything he ever says. Once you go down that road and you start censoring people like him, people need to realize it's really going to hurt the left more. It's really going to hurt the voices that want liberty and discussions and all the truth. It's going to hurt people who want to inform others about the truth. Independent media, independent journalists, citizen journalists. That's what's going to hurt the most. But unfortunately, the power grabbers, the people in charge, twist it. So, oh no, we need to protect people from the lies he says. There's a very fine line, between inciting violence, etc., and all of that. I'm not dismissing it, but what I am saying is, once you go down that road, just because you don't agree with what somebody on the right says, and you silence that, we cannot forget that that's going to come back and bite us, because that's what always happens. And in order to get people to realize, hey, you need to care about this, they need to realize it's not just a libertarian that cares about this. It's not just a Republican that should speak out against this. It should be people on the left. We should be seeing it from progressive Democrats on the left. I see it very, very little. And I think that's one of the things we should require from anybody that we are supporting for public office, 100%. And that's one of the things that gets left behind.
So one of the only people really in Congress with a backbone, even to a bit of a degree, is Thomas Massie, in the way that he stood up and at least forced everyone to show their faces as they gave $5 trillion and 2 generations of humans away to the largest corporations and banking institutions in the world. But I did want to ask you, Daniel, since you are running for Senate, I figure I could toss you a question about policy and the power that you would have as a senator to actually change the institution in and of itself.
Well, thank you. I mean, the key thing that I'm thinking about when we're having this discussion is that, our secret weapon is that the human mind is actually not a computer. The human mind does not act according to information. And the theory that, these sort of Obama and neocon types set up a lot of this sort of attack on conspiracy theory. The theory that they have is that you can sort of, if you say it enough, like the big lie, then it is true. And it is not. We are at the end of an era because of the fact that we've had so many decades of this total crap. And it has huge implications for the economy, because people have, continued to believe the lie that you can just sort of, if I say it, it is true. And that's what's fundamentally happening with, for example, the 6 trillion or more that, as you say, Thomas Massie was the only person to actually talk about this, 6 trillion or more that has been asserted by the Federal Reserve, their ability to print this money just to get it going. And the point being that they're using that money to support speculative markets. I think it's really important to take a view that what we're dealing with in terms of the military-industrial complex, the secret government, and so forth, the surveillance state, is completely interwoven with this international financial oligarchical cancer that we're dealing with. And that is Wall Street and the City of London, and especially the City of London, far more than most people realize. I mean, think about, we've been mentioning satanic pedophiles a couple of times. Look at Prince Andrew. Okay, Prince Andrew, people would say, oh, the monarchy is not so important. It's not such a big deal. He, as member of the British Crown, is responsible for the Cayman Islands, where 75%, that's a British Crown territory. 75% of the world's hedge funds are located there. And if you want to change the conditions for Americans, I think we have to reassert the idea that we are going to abolish the kind of information theory of the economy that has allowed the Silicon Valley types and the Wall Street whiz kids to rise to the top. We need to put mass numbers of people to work on an actual future for the country. And this is actually the exact time that this program should be discussed. I mean, what Franklin Roosevelt did would be my model. Essentially, we need Glass-Steagall. We need to be able to have credit flowing, large amounts of credit flowing to national infrastructure. And we need to have a focus on those projects that will increase the technological and capability of the country so that we're increasing the rate of physical production. And that means a big focus on things like space and fusion power.
If I could add to that too, I would say a fundamental rebuilding of America's trades, like the skilled trades in and of themselves. Because as someone who's an entrepreneur in a trade, it's completely hollow. You have that ancient elder class of electricians, plumbers, repairmen, and so forth, and then this modern version of people that almost taught themselves. But that's an issue for a different day.
You're HVAC. You're barely a trade. Come on. Come on. Yeah, fucking. My work truck is my truck, and I'm doing this from a hotel balcony, and I'm looking at it right now, reminding myself that I should really take the tools out of it, put it in my wife's car, and lock that shit down. But no, you're right. I mean, there's so many different ways that we can approach a sustainable future. There's so many different ways we can define a sustainable future, but the one thing I think that everybody who isn't already benefiting from the security that you get when you are part of, an illegal, obscene shadow government, is that we can't have what we have right now. I was having a conversation. I spent like a week on Murder Mountain, if you're familiar with the Netflix series.
I thought you were actually on a mountain.
Pardon?
I thought you were actually on a murder mountain. I was kind of.
Well, that's what they call it. That's the nickname of this particular community off of a totally just damn near lunar landscape looking dirt road off the hills and out in the hills in Humboldt County. But we were talking about like trying to replace the sorry, give me just 1 second. We were talking about whether or not it was smarter to replace government officials or to replace government. And I personally feel like if you have a machine that's designed to kill you, then putting a couple of new parts on it every 2 to 4 years is just going to prolong the life of that machine. And whereas we have a point right now, we're on some sort of precipice where we can either build something new and different, or we can keep trying to, put another coat of paint on it or put another couple of parts on it. And I don't see a sustainable future out of the system that we currently have, because the system that we currently have is by and large for show, while a handful of unelected fucking sociopaths determine not only who gets to be in office, but what legislation they get to pass.
Well, and not only that, like the people we have that are in control, they're okay. So I'm like, kind of a rational thinking human being, right? And the people who are in charge right now think that we can solve issues by like blowing shit up and, killing people and starving people. And you guys, I don't understand why that's an acceptable path that we want to go on as a species. Like, Jesus Christ, y'all. Why is it not?
Edward Bernays wrote this book about 110 years ago. and ever since then, it's kind of just been open season on propaganda.
Yeah. But seriously, though, you guys, why is it not the goal of humanity to, try to take care of each other and make sure things are better? And why are we trying to like blow each other up? It's ridiculous. Like, we're grown-ups, right? Like grown-ups are supposed to be in charge, and it's I don't understand why it's an acceptable path that humanity is on, where we just kill everybody, blow shit up. It's absurd. It's the most ridiculous thing, and I don't understand why people. I don't know. I'm rambling again because I'm pissed off. Sorry.
I
So,
would
Fee,
say it's a co-opting of what, a traditional set of spiritual values that turned militaristic in nature, coupled with the fact that in an increasingly secular society, political identity has all of the same energy that you would put into some sort of religion. And you see this so clearly, um, not just with Republicans and Democrats, where it's sort of embraced and baked into it, but the progressive left, it they canonized Bernie Sanders, they canonized AOC, and all of this like religious fervor and the dogma that comes with it was rolled into the campaigns, and it's just it's so incredibly frustrating to watch. Like you need to not make saints out of political figures, especially someone with a 40-year career in politics who has supported damn near every bullshit intervention that we've done, has supported damn near every round of sanctions that we've levied against the country that we were trying to destabilize for acquisition of natural resources. I'll shut up now, though.
But it's true. You're absolutely right, though, and I'm going to ramble on again because this pisses me off. It's like people they don't even know the record, the true record of the politicians that they're supporting. It's they grab onto the bits and pieces that they like, and the sound bites that make them feel warm and fuzzy inside, and they don't actually look at a person's. They're impressed by snarky tweets and loud speeches, and
so
it's
here's my idea about what we've witnessed with the rise and fall of, not even fall yet, of these essentially internet sensation politicians. And it started with President Obama, to where, and it's something that the documentary that Millie Weaver put out kind of talks about, how they'll use influence operations throughout independent media, throughout social media, to create, develop, and target people based on what they believe in. And in 2016, when Bernie Sanders literally just turned his back on the information that exposed the damning corruption that was being used against him, I think part of that influence strategy and the hope was that they could still take those people and turn them into Hillary Clinton supporters. And it's something that I feel like people have just now begun calling out in the independent media, the fact that these heroes have essentially turned their back on the people that gave them that power and status to begin with. So I just hope here that in this next era that we're entering into, people don't just build, I don't know, facades around a belief system and just say, well, I believe this, so the leader does too. Yeah.
Well,
if you real quick though, if you could, Fee, I wanted to give you a chance to ask Daniel any questions that you had for him as someone that regularly interviews political candidates. I'd really be interested in knowing what you'd like to ask him.
Well, what is your stance? You don't seem to be pro Russiagate at all, which is great. But what would you do right now with an impending Cold nuclear war resurgence with China? Because that's what we're pushing next. Donald Trump just said that China is committing genocide against the Uyghurs. How would you deal with that sort of conflict?
My strong request to everyone would be to take September 5th on the morning, Eastern time, and join the Schiller Institute International Conference, where we will be joined by high-level diplomats from Russia and China. And recently, we've had Dmitry Polyansky, who's the first deputy permanent representative of the Russian Federation at the United Nations. We've had the Consul General of China to New York, Huang Ping, speak at a recent conference. And what they're saying is, we want to collaborate. We want to find some way for there to be peace and collaboration and, prosperity for the world, because they know that that's what's required. And what we're proposing at this conference on the 5th, and this is a big part of what my campaign is all about, is that there has to be a P5 summit. That Putin's, in fact, Mrs. LaRouche made this call for this summit back in early January before Putin did. And I went to Trump's rally in Wildwood in New Jersey, the only New Jersey rally that he's done. And I organized the Trump supporters to campaign, to join my efforts for an emergency peace summit between Trump, Putin, and Xi Jinping. And basically, that's what I think we need more than anything. You have to get these leaders of the world at the table. It should be way before the election. It should be in September. And take a careful look at what has been going on with Trump. Because, of course, it was John Bolton who ruined the situation with North Korea, and Mike Pompeo. And I think that Mike Pompeo is the greatest cancer on the earth. Big, fat, stupid Mike Pompeo. He is a danger to humanity, And but if Trump can sit down with these people on his own, I have faith that Trump is educable. I think that he could sit down with them. He could sort of put these, Iagos out of his ear, or prevent them from slipping the poison into his ear, and he could actually hear them out. Because what I see is that the reason that I'm hopeful, and what I would really encourage as a way to look at what we should be hopeful about when we're feeling extremely frustrated, which is quite natural, is that you have tremendous growth of a new paradigm in the world. And right now, China is heavily involved in that, leading that with the Belt and Road Initiative, which is, I think, a great good for humanity. So if we could get if we could get Trump to sit down with these guys, I think that's the most important thing to happen now before the election.
I think one of the most important things, and this is just personally as the U.S. operates on an international stage, is requiring that countries have a free and open press, and is requiring that countries respect the civil liberties of their citizens. Because we saw a lot of horrifying things come out of China during the initial stages of the Wuhan lockdown. And when you have a population of 1 billion unarmed people without the ability to accurately and freely distribute information, there's problems. So I think that setting precedents like that as we operate internationally is just as important, because people should be speaking out. And one of the things that I want to commend you for is taking what you want and the vision that you have for this to a Trump rally, because that's something that we've talked about in regards to Julian Assange as well, is getting people to Trump rallies, specifically passing out free Assange signs, free Assange banners, t-shirts, anything you can get your hands on, really. And having the people there, the security, have to either allow people in with mass free Assange signs given to most attendees, or remove them and literally pull the illusion out of the hands of the people going into these Trump rallies. So I think that using, if it ever opens and if he's allowed to rally again, because I don't really follow that too, or as closely as I should, I think that's one of the best ways to secure freedom for Julian, is directly going to his base at the specific moments where he speaks to them.
Just a quick response is, I think that's a fabulous idea. I think it's really important to engage with the Trump supporters, because a lot of them are former Democrats. It's a big mixture of people who go to a Trump rally. It's different, like how people point out that sort of like the left, like Michael Tracy likes to make the point that the left activist Twitter is not really representative necessarily of what people, what many other people think. Well, the MAGA Twitter that we see, or the MAGA sort of like personalities that you see, that's not necessarily representative of the Trump supporters generally, but they're preyed upon by Steve Bannon and the Epoch Times. These are lies about the Uyghurs. It's total nonsense, and you can read the Gray Zone to see all of the evidence of that. Yeah. It's total nonsense, but it's terrifyingly dangerous because it's recruiting people to this hate and fear outlook. But I really think that what you're describing with the Assange effort on these signs, that's exactly the way to go. And if there are rallies again before the election, and really more fundamentally, if Julian Assange is allowed to die in prison, then it may be the end of free press, period. You know, if we allow this to happen, then it's absolutely the case we may never ever be able to overcome this. We might just end up just thrown into a totalitarian state that would lead to war.
Real quick, Daniel, can I follow up with you after the show and try to get you booked for my other show at some point in the next week or so?
I'd love that.
Okay, great. You know what I want to do? I want to populate baseball stadiums with cardboard cutouts of Julian Assange and Edward Snowden and Bill Binney and like all of our political prisoners and truth tellers, because there's a thing in Major League Baseball now and other sporting events where you pay like $50 to $100 and there's a cardboard cutout of you as a fan in the stands. And I would just like, it's so limited too, like hardly anybody's doing this. So I would love to be able to just have, you know, some like, okay, fine, I know I'm going to get in trouble for it, but look, Julian Assange is in the stands right now. Look, that's what, you know, I think that's a small little act of protest that we could crowdfund relatively easily. And I'm a baseball player.
I was about to message you, but could you send me the link to that?
Yeah.
Lord.
Yeah, that's gonna be fun. But I don't know how much time everybody has this evening, but we do have a news section we want to move into here soon. So I just wanted to give you guys the chance to put out some final thoughts and where people can find you.
Okay, well, I am Fiorella Isabel. I'm on Twitter, Fiorella_IM. Also on the Convo Couch on YouTube. We have been covering on the ground protests, also election integrity. We are doing a documentary on what's happening with our machines. So be on the lookout for that. And yeah, hit us up on the Convo Couch.
Well, for one, the election day is November 3rd for me, and you know, I'm going up against Cory Booker and so forth. I'm going to be one of 5 candidates on the that you can vote for on the ballot. So go to my website and see what I'm doing at burkeforsenate.com, and get on my Twitter. I'm at Burke for Senate, which is with a digit 4. But the main thing I'd like to invite people to do is to come to this, to get onto this video conference on September 5th. And if you get on my Twitter, I'm going to be posting a bunch of stuff on it. And I would really I'd like to personally invite all of you to come on to that, inclusive of being able to speak to thousands of people from across the world. Perhaps we'll have 1,000-2,000 people on the program, and share with them what is vital about action for Assange. I mean, literally, you know, the action that's needed to rescue him and to rescue press freedom. So that's my invitation to everyone on the program and everyone watching this, because I think it's extremely dangerous. I think we're in such a bad situation. Most people have no ability to even consider how bad it is. You know, we're not really going to have an election in all likelihood. You might not know who's going to be president for weeks and weeks and weeks. It's going to be a terribly challenging period for the country. And so somehow something needs to be done right now to change that.
So
such a good point. I wonder if it sunk into enough people that unless you hold election day on election day and there are people there to count, tabulate, and release vote totals, that it could take weeks or a month or longer before we would know the results of the election. And both candidates have said that they're perfectly ready to challenge the results of the election. And there's no reason to think that any election held in this country has a shred of goddamn legitimacy to it in the first place. He can speak to that better than most right now because of the work that the Convo Couch has done looking into the lack of election integrity in this country.
So full disclosure, and I should have started with this, but most people in the audience know. I'm a member of the Ohio Green Party State Central Committee. I'm also a registered libertarian in the state of California and a delegate for Adam Kokesh, who's a libertarian presidential candidate. But I wanted to pop a question over to you, Daniel, about limitations and issues you've ran into on the local level, just simply trying to get ballot access and be able to participate in democracy as someone who wants to be a candidate.
Well, you know what? I mean, the hardest thing for me has been the pandemic. I can't. It's just changed everything. I would have had a much more mobile, active campaign. I'd be out everywhere. I'd be intervening. I'd be going to the Republican Party, going to the Democratic Party. I'm running as an independent, of course, and I would be challenging them and trying to get something out very direct. So the signature requirements in New Jersey are very light. That's not been the issue. The issue is just the total narrative control. And that's the primary thing. And I'll say at this point that it's Robert Mueller was the one who put Lyndon LaRouche in prison. And if you talk about a person who has been maligned beyond belief, just look at Lynn. And he died, God rest his soul, last year in February. But that man fought his ass off, and then his name became totally radioactive. And so I'm fighting for his exoneration, just as I'm fighting, well, in a different way, and I'm fighting for Assange's freedom. We need that kind of just rip things up and get some kind of a major shift that allows people to talk about things that they're not supposed to talk about. That's what I like. I like it when we talk about things that you're not supposed to talk about. One story, my first big jump into public activity was when Hillary Clinton was giving a speech in 2015 in July in Manhattan, and I went to the speech, and I just stood up towards the end of it because she was giving this bullshit about how she was going to protect Main Street from Wall Street, and I said, Hillary Clinton, will you restore Glass-Steagall? And she wouldn't say a thing. She didn't answer me. But I got interviewed by 8 papers, and later the same day, one of her campaign liaisons came out and said, under Hillary Clinton, we will never restore Glass-Steagall. And that taught me a lot. If you can somehow insert something that's so truthful that no one else can deny it, then you might be able to change the conditions.
Sophie, I wanted to lobby the same question over to you about just issues you've seen in the process so far, because you've been someone that's experienced censorship in regards to covering the voting process and the primaries and things like that. So if you could.
Issues regarding the elections?
Yeah, and issues that you've seen with like tampering or rigging or what have you.
Right. So most recently we covered a race in Florida. It was Florida's 13th congressional or 23rd congressional district. Debbie Wasserman Schultz was running, and there was a candidate named Jen Parliament who was running as a Democrat. We had some people that are still looking into it, but they were looking at the videotapes of the results. And it showed that the more people voted for the judges, which is like a lower, lesser known race. I don't know about you, but when I go out to vote, the judges are the last ones because it's harder to find any information on them. It's harder to see. They're supposed to be nonpartisan. So you kind of have to really do your research on that. They found that more people, 2 to 3 times more people voted for that race than they did for the congressional race, which was a race that got a lot of media attention, a lot of volunteers. That's the red flag when you're looking at election integrity, because that shows that votes weren't counted. And another thing that happened was that they were really pushing for a drop in mail situation where you take a ballot and you drop it off at a particular location. And if we were in a democratic or in a free country, like many like to call this country, we would be allowed to oversee the ballot counting. We would be allowed to go in there and watch once the polls closed. And according to a statute in Florida, the public is allowed to do that. But when we as media went to try and do that, they physically shoved Pasta and Johnny out of the room and threatened to call the police and all of these things when they were just wanted to oversee the counting of the ballots. And every other place that was supposed to be open for the counting of the ballots was not accessible to anybody. And so what we're seeing is, even if you want to say that there's not evidence of election fraud, if you want to ignore what happened in 2020 with the Iowa app, with Bernie Sanders's numbers being off, with 2016 and everything that happened in New York, Arizona, California, all of that, if you want to ignore all of that, you can't prove that it's not happening either. So I think just like freedom of speech and protecting our civil liberties, protecting our elections is so crucial, because this is why people don't vote. Because other than voting suppression, which is where they make people wait 8 hours, they close the polling lines, they run out of ballots, which all of that happened in the last election and several primaries. Other than all of that, the machines, we don't have an ability to see what's inside these machines. It's proprietary software. We are not allowed to actually ask about anything. And so that to me is it's ludicrous that not that many people care about that not that many people even want to go there. And when we were talking about this like a year and a half ago, people were like, oh, well, that's conspiracy theory. You need proof. In a system where we don't have control of the machines and the mechanisms of how the election works, how could we provide proof other than by telling you like, this doesn't match? These numbers aren't accurate. They do this thing called fraction magic. And what we're exploring now for the election integrity documentary is how the program can be written to change the numbers. We spoke with a guy who, his name is Clint Curtis. He has different political beliefs than I do. He's definitely on the neoliberal, more democratic side, but he is a fighter for election integrity. And he was approached by a previous official in Florida to write a program to rig a primary for him. And he didn't do it. And he walked away. And so we are interviewing people like him and others who are aware that it's easy because all of these machines have access to SIM cards, USBs. All it takes is the right person to have the right code. If an 11-year-old can hack into our elections in Florida, believe me, anybody can do it. The problem is they're more readily likely to believe that Russia can hack our elections and can influence us so much. And if they believe that Russia can do it, fine, Russia could do it. But why don't you believe that domestically both parties have been doing this for a very long time? And so that's something that we want to wake people up to.
Why isn't there a push for open source software on these voting machines? If they're going to use Russia as the scapegoat and say that, well, they can just hack right into these, then why aren't you allowing an open source code for our vote tabulations or the way that the voting machines work, where you can have truly independent third parties monitor what is happening in real time during elections with these election machines? And the reason that they don't do that, of course, is because they need to be able to control the vote outcome and then blame it on Russia or blame it on Venezuela or blame it on Iran or blame it on China. The excuse generators.
Or they just blame it. They just blame it on, oh, you did it. Not enough people believe in these radical things you want. They gaslight. Like, it's either another foreign intervention on our elections, or it's either that, well, I guess people aren't ready for your radical form of socialism. I guess that's people don't want healthcare. And that's obviously not the case. It doesn't match where things people want. If you go into even like Republican counties in Florida, Republican counties in the Midwest, and you talk to people about, hey, we should have public college be free or provided, just reallocating this money here. A lot of people would agree with it if you don't politicize it in a certain way. But the problem is that they have to maintain this idea that none of this works. So you continue to say, well, I guess we need to pick a more centrist sort of politician, and that so we could win. And obviously we've seen that doesn't work. This is why Donald Trump is president. And this is how they continue going about it, because they don't want, you're right, they're absolutely right. They don't want control of, they don't want to let go of their control of this, because if they do, then things will drastically get really bad for them. And so what people need to do, and what people need to realize is we don't have access to the right information. If we don't have control of the real fourth estate, and if we don't have control of our elections, none of the things we want, whether it's Medicare for all, anti-imperialism, anti-intervention, Green New Deal, all these things that people want aren't going to happen when we can't make them happen through the electoral space. I mean, they can happen, but it's going to take like literally people being in the streets and like demanding it. It's not going to happen via politicians or an electorate. And just going into like the whole deifying politicians, like that, no politician is going to fix this, because the outrage and the attention has to come from the public. And if the public can't get that information, that truthful information, if we can't talk about elections and about censorship and all of this stuff, they're never going to know that it exists. And so that's why this is all connected. There's no separation into the things we want, and to how everything is connected, whether it's foreign policy, domestic. There's no separation between all of this.
Well, and this is kind of how I knew that Bernie Sanders was not who people were hoping he was going to be. Like, people argue with me about this all the time, but the fact that the dude has spent the past 4 years on Russiagate rather than election integrity after he got cheated in 2016, I mean, you guys, there's no excuse for that. There's no excuse for that. I mean, he could have pushed for paper ballots. He could have been out there, talking to the people that follow him about, trying to protect elections and, rid the party that he is now, sheepdogging for. He totally bought into whatever that game is. And
it's so easy. The problem is they have to have someone willing to sell out. Like, if you look at Jill Stein, literally just through the use of a lawsuit over the course of 2 years, was able to force the state of Pennsylvania to switch from electronic machines to handwritten, hand-counted paper ballots. Just because in court, if you can't view the information on the voting machines, then you can't use them because of public disclosure laws. But you have a revolutionary movement on both sides that's so stifled that neither of them can get together long enough to bring 50 class action lawsuits against all the states for these same things. But I know we're running out of time with you, Daniel. So I want to just give you one last chance to give some final thoughts, and I'll let people know where to find you.
I'll just be very brief and say that I really appreciate this discussion, and I'm dedicated to an optimism that there's a potential to shift to a totally new system, because it's clear that that's what we need. We're facing a collapse economically, we're facing a collapse socially, culturally, and especially strategically. But it's exactly at this moment that we should be fighting for the highest ideal of what we could create for the next generation. And I think that includes emphatically liberating the prisoners who have been put there unjustly, and liberating people who have been slandered and attacked from that situation. And I have faith that the people can respond. They might not. That's why we fight. So thank you very much.
I agree with that sentiment 100%. Chris Hedges said, I don't fight fascists because I'll win. I fight them because they're fascists. Like that's why. Daniel, thank you very much for your time. I am going to follow up with you a little bit later and try and get you on Slow News Day here. Hopefully before I get on a plane and we all go to DC for 3 weeks to hold our actions and demonstrations and events during Julian's show trial. So yeah, I really do. I appreciate it. Thank you very much for your time and good luck against Cory Booker. That is someone I would love to see lose his job.
Thanks a lot. Take care. Very good to meet you all.
Bye.
Thank you.
And Fee, I don't know what kind of time you have. You're welcome to stick around while we go through news if you don't have anything going on. I gotta say, I love how the Californians have done the show outside.
I have a protest that I have to go to, unfortunately, or fortunately, but yeah. But I just wanted to say thank you for having me on, and you guys are really doing important work, because, like I said, not a lot of people talk about Julian Assange because it is so far removed from everything they're facing. I kind of understand it. You know, people are facing, especially here in California, there's fires, there's homelessness, there's evictions coming up, there's, COVID, there's all these things happening. The elections are a giant SNL skit. It's all a mess and everything's falling apart. And so I think people just don't realize why everything's falling apart is because we've let it go on for so long like this, because we haven't realized how we've been cheated and tricked for so long. And, the whole idea of praising people like AOC and Bernie without criticizing them and holding them accountable and just lauding them like to be these perfect pedestals, especially AOC worries me more because she has this following and this ability, and instead of using it to really push people like Pelosi, she uses it for herself and to make herself like the Yas queen of the internet, which I love to call her out on that because it's ridiculous. I was once a hardcore supporter of her, but when you start seeing these things, you realize that she's not really in it for the people,
I used to get so much shit about AOC because from day one, I said her and the Just Us Democrats are not there to wrest away the power from Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer. They're there to inherit it. And if you don't recognize that, you're never going to be able to hold them accountable. And is there a way that Action for Assange could get a little bit of time on the combo couch before we go to DC so that if any of your audience is in the DC area, we can invite them on? That would be excellent. That's a possibility.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we'll just have to set a date and we'll just have to have, some of you guys on or one of you, whoever on, and we'll make it happen. Yeah, we definitely want to draw attention to that. And it'd be really awesome to have like you guys on and then, kind of talk about what you guys are doing. Maybe put you guys while you're there. Maybe we could do like a Zoom in too as well. That'd be really something I'd be open to doing. So thank you guys so much.
We'll definitely set that up. And it's always great to talk to you. You're a wonderful person and I enjoy you. I enjoy your content and this has been great.
Thank you so much, guys. Have a great rest of your evening. Pleasure. Bye.
So we didn't really dive into the PDF with.
I'm gonna pick that apart for Saturday. I'm gonna get Bill Binney's affidavit nice and snipped out so that way we don't have to do like a share screen. We can just have the images.
So what are we going to in news then?
The UK lawyer's letter to the UK government. So we've covered this, but we never actually read the statement. And this is the letter in and of itself. So I just wanted to make sure that we could get at least the opening of this out because it does address pretty much all of the power players in the UK government. And I just want to make sure that we give this enough time to really digest it. So I'm going to drop the link for everybody here into the chat.
We're gonna get yelled at for dead air.
Right?
Are we reading the letter? Is that what?
Just the first bit of it.
Just
'Cause
the
it-
first what?
The first, like, basically into part B, like that first section there.
All
The,
right.
like, opening and illegality, because it really drives home everything that's being put in this case.
Okay. Well, this letter is dated 14 August. Which, oh shit! By the way, happy birthday, Susie Dawson. And I think it's probably a belated birthday wish in real time now because she's 11 hours in the future. But yeah, Susie is a wonderful human being and a truly inspirational woman. And they said it in a tweet the other day because it's true, and I'm not here to bullshit you guys. I'm a better activist and have a better understanding of the world around me because of Susie Dawson. So happy 40th birthday.
Maybe we should drop her, what is it, her Get Go fund or whatever. I don't know.
Actually, I have the link pulled up. I'll put it in the chat for everybody.
To protect Susie.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hey,
We'll
stick it in there, Steve, because I don't have that one handy.
Okay.
I'll put it in Element too,
I'll have
Josh.
to go dig it up, but I will.
It's an Element.
I
It's
got
also
it.
on the doc.
I got it.
Okay. But back to the letter, it is addressed to the Prime Minister, the Lord Chancellor, and Secretary of State for Justice, the Secretary of State for Foreign Affairs, and the Home Secretary. We write to you as legal practitioners and legal academics to express our collective concerns about the violation of Mr. Julian Assange's fundamental human, civil, and political rights and the precedent his persecution is setting. We call on you to act in accordance with national and international law, human rights, and the rule of law by bringing an end to the ongoing extradition proceedings and granting Mr. Assange his long overdue freedom from torture, arbitrary detention, and deprivation of liberty, and political persecution. And we're reading so this is section A in the letter, and we're not going to go through the entire thing as mentioned. We will go and cover this because of the illegality of potential extradition to the United States. I am feeling self-conscious about saying the word extradition out loud on this vigil. I am. But I'm reading, so I guess it doesn't make a bit of a difference because we all know it's an extraordinary rendition. We all know it's a broad daylight fucking kidnapping, which would, from the UK to the US, would be illegal on the following grounds. A, risk of being subjected to an unfair trial in the US. Extradition would be unlawful owing to failure to ensure the protection of Mr. Assange's fundamental trial rights in the United States. Mr. Assange faces show trial at the infamous Espionage Court of the Eastern District of Virginia, before which no national security defendant has ever succeeded. Here, he faces secret proceedings before a jury picked from a population in which most of the individuals eligible for jury selection work for or are connected to the CIA, the NSA, the DoD, or the DOS. Furthermore, Mr. Assange's legal privilege, a right enshrined in Article 8 of the European Convention on Human Rights and long recognized under English common law, was grossly violated through constant and criminal video and audio surveillance at the Ecuadorian embassy carried out by the Spanish security firm UC Global. The surveillance was... I'm sorry, I heard something. Anywho, I'll go back to that. The surveillance was, according to witness testimony, ordered by the CIA and has triggered an investigation into the owner of UC Global, David Morales, by Spain's High Court, the Audiencia Nacional. The surveillance resulted in all of Mr. Assange's meetings and conversations being recorded, including those with his lawyers. The Council of Bar and Law Societies of Europe, which represents more than 1 million European lawyers, has expressed its concern that these illegal recordings may be used openly or secretly in proceedings against Mr. Assange in the event of successful extradition to the U.S. The Council states that if the information merely became known to the prosecutors, this would present an irredeemable breach of Mr. Assange's fundamental rights to a fair trial under Article 6 of the European Convention on Human Rights and due process under the U.S. Constitution. Furthermore, the prosecuting state obtained the totality of Mr. Assange's legal papers after their unlawful seizure in the embassy. Upon hearing that the government of Ecuador was planning to seize and hand over personal belongings of Mr. Assange, including documents, telephones, electronic devices, memory drives, etc., to the U.S., the UN Special Rapporteur on Privacy, Joseph Kanakti, maybe? I don't know. Anywho, expressed his serious concern to the Ecuadorian government and twice formally requested it to return Mr. Assange's personal effects to his lawyers to no avail. The UN Model Treaty on Extradition prohibits extradition if the person is not received or would not receive the minimum guarantees in criminal proceedings as enshrined in Article 14 of the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights. I did not know that there was a covenant, nor that it was international, but it would sure be nifty if that was upheld and respected.
And that's the important part about this week's call to action, is making sure that information like this is at least broadcast as loudly as possible to the Department of Justice and to the actual institutions that are persecuting Julian here in the United States. Because the high-level people may understand this, but the rank and file probably know about as much as everyone else in the general public. So sending this information in, especially to the addresses that I listed on there, they're literally just the ones I could find to scrape off for different complaint lines, is super important, because Julian's basic rights to privacy were completely trampled over. He basically lost the ability to communicate freely with his lawyer once he got put into prison, even beyond the actual communications being stolen from the embassy. And it wasn't until this last hearing that he was actually able to communicate with his lawyers at all since March.
Well, let's not pretend that it was just Julian's privacy that was invaded. Every single person that came to visit him, that called him, that sent him a letter, his lawyers, his friends, his family, all of them, they were all spied on, all of them. There were, microphones in the women's bathroom. They would take their phones and download their data or steal their batteries or whatever. They were, taking laptops and kind of hacking into them. And I mean, this is not just Julian that this has affected. And that's what's kind of crazy about it, is that this is an intense invasion of privacy. Like, this is, if anything else, you're supposed to have, what do they call it? Client lawyer confidentiality or whatever, or client lawyer privilege or whatever it is. But he didn't even have that. He wasn't even able to communicate with his own lawyers, free from being spied on and having that sent to the CIA. That's crazy. That right there should be grounds for this case to be thrown out immediately. It shouldn't even be a conversation at this point, Well,
and it goes back to when Garland Nixon was on my show a couple of weeks ago, and he was like, I am so tired of hearing the words rule of law in general, but specifically where Julian Assange is concerned. For all of us, there's no such thing as rule of law. It is at best an arbitrary application, and that in no way, shape, or form meets any of the standards that a rule of law would set.
Well, the issue really comes down to that law doesn't have any basis in morality or even reason most times. And that's something that Julian's case highlights best, because it is enshrined in law that in the United States, the highest order is the Constitution legally. But somehow, in some way, there's this strange caveat that doesn't apply if you're outside of the U.S. and a non-U.S. citizen, but our intelligence laws apply. The national security state laws apply. The laws that allow the deep state to flourish apply internationally. but not the ones that allow information to be proliferated.
It's almost like we live in a fucking cartoon.
It is almost like that, isn't it?
I heard
Almost.
I heard Jimmy Dore is peddling like a very similar
He did.
line.
I heard it.
Did he?
Yeah, I right after Aaron Mate was on his show, he several tweets.
I think I've heard him say it like in the
were like,
past.
"This is incredibly cartoonish," and it's like,
Yeah.
have us on your show, like we'll, have action for Assange on your show, Jimmy Dore. Like your viewers, you owe it to your viewers to bring people on that aren't careerists or in it for institutional security and are just pretty much fucking balls out crazy activist anarchists with the deep and abiding love of personal freedom.
So, speaking of deep abiding love of personal freedom, I'd like to encourage everyone to sign the Reporters Without Borders letter in support of Julian. I'm going to drop the link in chat, and if we could pull that up just to kind of go over a little bit, because it is super important for people to sign this themselves. I didn't put it as the call to action because it's been put out by multiple people, but this is a call to action in and of itself to hop on there to sign this open letter and to at least share it one time, if not regularly, because this is something that is, as an institution, Reporters Without Borders can't really be ignored internationally. So them acting in this way makes a big difference.
I'm trying to get it opened up. My kid popped out here to try and have me a half drink root beer, and that didn't seem like anything that.
Are we reading it? Is that what we're doing here?
There's really not too much. We can pull up their open letter if we want to, but it's more of a petition. All it really says on the website is Reporters Without Borders is firmly opposed to the possible extraordinary rendition of Julian Assange to the United States, where he could be sentenced for up to 175 years in prison for charges that include publishing and providing journalists with information that serve the public interest. And then they put update: the U.S. extradition hearing against Julian Assange will resume on 7 September at the Central Criminal Court in London. We will be delivering this petition to the UK authorities that morning. Help us reach 100,000 signatures by signing and sharing. And then it has underneath it the full letter. So I don't know if we want to dig in to read that because it's not too long. Or if you guys wanted to just kind of put that out there for everybody.
We can just let the audience decide if they want to read it or not, I believe. The thing that I think that we should spend, if it was up to me, we would basically spend the rest of our time on the timeline of releases. But if you...
Yeah, no, we definitely can.
If you want to go through stuff quickly, No,
I mean, we got about 25 minutes. We could go through the timeline of releases.
Because when I was hanging out on Murder Mountain, a friend of my show, a guy called Benjamin Balderson, is throwing a heathen Norse cosmology festival on October 15th on this property, and it's called The Thing, which was what Norse cultures used to do, I believe, biannually, and it was to it was when everyone would gather for everything from marriages to litigation to just giant communal events. So there's more people up there than we expected. We expected that we were going to, evacuate our town because it was on fire and just go kick it up at my buddy's new place, and I would help him, build some stuff and whatnot. But there's other motherfuckers there. So it's not like you can just all sit around and watch a movie together. You got to talk to each other. And there was a guy there who was completely not on board with Julian Assange, with WikiLeaks, with what we're doing here. So I had a number of days to talk to him about it. And this timeline that's on defend.wikileaks.org, it really helps sort of it gives people something that they can look at and recall, and it helps form the full picture of the decade-long smear campaign against WikiLeaks and Julian Assange, because this dude's pretty aware of what's going on in the world around him, but had no idea that Julian had been subjected to the targeting that he has for as long as he has. So I feel like this timeline here could be helpful to other people. Not that you'll necessarily find yourself, way the hell off grid on a notorious mountain in Humboldt County, but like it's possible you'll engage people in conversations of this nature. And I do. I think this is a good resource. So if we could all kind of tag team this, that would be cool.
Yeah, I'll take the first couple.
All right, go for it.
So this actually isn't the very beginning of WikiLeaks, but this is 2009. September, WikiLeaks releases the Milton Report, exposing a toxic waste dump incident that affected up to 108,000 people. The UK media had been suppressed from mentioning the report or its contents since a secret gag order was issued against the Guardian newspaper on September 11th, 2009. The report was commissioned through Watterson and Hicks, a UK law firm, possibly to claim the client attorney privilege should it leak. The company concerned, Trafigura, is a giant multinational oil and commodity trader. The Milton Report assesses an incident involving Trafigura and the Ivory Coast town of Abidjan, possibly the most culpable mass contamination incident since Bhopal. In 2010, April, WikiLeaks releases the collateral murder videos. July, WikiLeaks publishes the Afghan war logs, a collection of 750,000 documents revealing information on unreported killings of hundreds of civilians by coalition forces, increased Taliban attacks, and involvement by Pakistani and Iranian insurgents. August, during his visit to Sweden, Julian becomes subjected to sexual assault allegations. The case was investigated, and the most serious allegation was immediately found to be baseless. However, the case was later reopened by another prosecutor. October, WikiLeaks publishes the Iraq war logs, exposing numerous cases of torture and abuse of Iraqi prisoners by Iraqi police and soldiers, as well as the U.S. government involvement in the deaths and maiming of more than 200,000 people in Iraq. In November, WikiLeaks began publishing Cablegate, now the Public Library of U.S. Diplomacy, a growing collection of 3.3 million diplomatic cables from 274 consulates and embassy from the time of 1996 until 2010. December, following the release of the first batch of the diplomatic cables, WikiLeaks and its founder, Julian Assange, were denounced as terrorists by several politicians and media commentators. Former Vice President Joe Biden branded Julian a high-tech terrorist, while prominent Republican Sarah Palin called him an anti-American operative with blood on his hands. December, Julian is arrested in London in the police station on December 7, 2010, following a European arrest warrant from Sweden relating to the sexual allegations. He appears in court the same day, saying that he intends to fight the extradition to Sweden in order to avoid extradition to the U.S., where he would be prosecuted. Julian is denied bail and remains in custody until December 14th, where he is released on house arrest. In 2010, following WikiLeaks' publication of the Iraq and Afghan war logs and State Department diplomatic cables, several major fictional financial institutions, including the Bank of America, Visa, MasterCard, PayPal, and Western Union, refused to process donations to WikiLeaks, cutting the revenue by 95%. The UN High Commissioner for Human Rights openly criticized the extra-legal financial blockade against WikiLeaks, as do the UN Special Rapporteur on the Promotion and Protection of the Right and Freedom of Opinion and Expression, and the Inter-American Commission on Human Rights Special Rapporteur for Freedom of Expression.
Do you want me to jump in and read some
Yeah,
more?
yeah, if you could.
Yeah. Okay, so 2011 in January, there's an email from the vice president of private intelligence firm Stratfor, revealed by WikiLeaks in 2012, states that the U.S. has a sealed indictment on Assange. In April, WikiLeaks releases the Guantanamo files, exposing systematic and routine violations of the Geneva Conventions and abuse of 800 prisoners as young as 14 and as old as 89 at Guantanamo Bay. Okay, in 2012, in June, Julian seeks political asylum at the Ecuadorian embassy in London, days after the Supreme Court rejects the last of his appeals against extradition to Sweden. Julian and supporters argue that his removal to Sweden would be followed by potential extradition to the U.S., likely on Espionage Act charges, where he could face the death penalty. On 19 June 2012, Ecuadorian Foreign Minister Ricardo Patino, announces that Julian has applied for political asylum, that his government is considering the request, and that Julian is at the Ecuadorian embassy in London. In August, Ecuador invokes international law in recognizing the political persecution of Julian and grants him the status of political refugee, judging his life to be at grave risk. Ecuador's decision is backed by the Union of South American Nations, countries, and ALBA. In July, the Syria files are published, providing an extraordinary insight into the Assad government through over 2 million emails from 680 Syrian political figures, ministries, and associated companies, and the regime's international security contracts. In December, a court ruling finds that the U.S. treatment of Khalid al-Masri amounts to torture and that he had been effectively disappeared by the U.S. and Macedonian authorities. Al-Masri, a Lebanese-born German citizen, was seized in Macedonia in 2003, transferred to Kabul as part of the U.S. Extraordinary Rendition Program, and detained for 4 months before being released without any charges on a roadside in Albania. He took his case to the European Court of Human Rights using 6 cables released by WikiLeaks in advance.
Evidence.
What?
Evidence.
Oh, evidence.
Was the last word.
What the hell did I say?
In advance.
Oh.
It's
I'm
late.
Which
tired.
wouldn't technically be
Homeschool's a
wrong.
bitch, y'all. Homeschool is a bitch. I'm tired.
I want to take a second here so that we can just process the heap of information that was rolled out in that timeline and just how fucking hard multiple world governments have been going against Julian Assange, who as far back as 8-9 years ago knew that the situation he is currently in was waiting for him.
So I want, before we jump back in, I want to read for a minute because they talk about the Stratfor leak that showed the secret indictment. And Mrs. Assange actually put a little bit out in regards to that earlier this week. So I just want to read over that real quick. In early 2011, Burton revealed that the internal Stratfor correspondence that a secret grand jury had already issued a sealed indictment for Assange. Not for pub. We have a sealed indictment for Assange. Please protect. According to Burton, Assange is going to make a nice bribe in prison. Screw the terrorist. He'll be eating cat food forever. A few weeks later, following Assange's release from a London jail, where he had been remanded as the result of a Swedish prosecutor's arrest warrant, Fred Burton told Sky News, extradition to the U.S. is more and more likely. Emails from Fred Burton revealed that the U.S. government employs the same counterterrorism tactics against Julian Assange and WikiLeaks as used against Al-Qaeda. Take down the money, go for the infrastructure. The tools we are using to nail and deconstruct WikiLeaks are the same tools used to dismantle and track AQ, Al Qaeda. Thank Cheney and 43, referring to George W. Bush, Big Brother owns his liberal terrorist arse. And that was Fred Burton in an email. 10 days after the CIA reportedly assassinated Osama bin Laden, Burton writes in an email sent to Stratford's secure mailing list that he can get access to the materials seized by Osama bin Laden's safe house. Burton states, federating out Julian Assange's Confederates is also key. Finding out what other disgruntled rogues inside the tent and outside pile on, move him from country to country to face various charges for the next 25 years, but seize everything he and his family own, to include every person linked to WikiLeaks. So those are the words of someone that runs an international spy organization. So I just always think that that's important to point out whenever the 2011 secret indictment's mentioned. Do you want to pick up a little bit and keep reading on, Steve?
Sure. We're at 2013, correct?
Yep.
Okay. Major trade agreements, TPP, TTIP, and TISA, drafted and negotiated in secret without proper democratic oversight, are made public when WikiLeaks publishes multiple draft chapters and negotiating positions, fueling social justice and fair trade movements. The documents are published in multiple releases over 2013, 15, and 16. The Trans-Pacific Partnership Agreement, TTP, and the TTIP are now stalled, while Trade and Service Agreement, TISA, remains classified. This release alone had it was one of the more globally impactful WikiLeaks releases when we get away from the Manning leaks. There are people that we have had on the show that have become targeted activists because of their work on these campaigns. And to this very day, all of these trade deals are still being negotiated in secret. There's still a push for the TTP or the TPP. There's still a push for the TTIP. Joe Biden is on record saying that he would like to revisit it. That was supposed to be part of fucking Barry Jones's fucking legacy was the TPP. So they're not going to forget that. Let's jump to 2015 in June. The Saudi Foreign Ministry files past to WikiLeaks reveal, among other things, that Britain conducted secret vote trading deals with Saudi Arabia to ensure both states were elected to the UN Human Rights Council. I fucking did not know that. I didn't fucking know that. Like, I remember being shocked that Saudi Arabia was allowed on the Human Rights Council. I thought it was the UN's version of a pretty good joke. But here we are, seeing that, the staple hand of Mary Old was responsible for that. Fuck, we live in a cartoon. July, the NSA world leaders targets a number of releases in July 2015 and February 2016, documenting NSA targets, including UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon's meetings with heads of state, Chancellor Merkel, Prime Ministers Berlusconi and Netanyahu, President Hollande, the Japanese cabinet, UNHCR, and WTO officials. And on to 2016. In February, the Central African Republic mining files reveal mining operations conducted by Western and Chinese companies in the CAR that escape responsibility for environmental consequences. The files contain detailed maps of mining rights, mining contracts with illegal kickbacks, and secret investigative reports. The UN Working Group on Arbitrary Detention concludes in a published report that Julian has been subject to arbitrary detention by UK and Swedish governments since 7th December 2010, including his time in prison on conditional bail in the Ecuadorian embassy, and that he was entitled to his freedom of movement and a compensation. So we're 4 years away removed from the UN Group on Arbitrary Detention saying, hey, at that point, for 6 years, this man had been arbitrarily detained. Do you guys have any thoughts on any of the stuff we've gone over, or should I just keep barreling through 2016? Because that was the year that broke everyone's brain.
I just think it's crazy that it took them that long to say that it was arbitrary detention. Like what had happened for the previous 6 years that had it not be arbitrary detention at that point? So I guess that's my only question. Like, I appreciate the Human Rights Council speaking out, but 6 years of arbitrary detention is a long time before anyone decides to truly intervene.
Okay. Well, I'll hop back in then. In July, the DNC leaks consist of 19,252 emails and 8,034 attachments from the U.S. Democratic National Party leadership, which result in the resignation of 5 top officials who had stacked the decks against one of the 2 Democratic candidates, Bernie Sanders, to favor Hillary Clinton. November, after receiving criticism from other Swedish law practitioners, the Swedish prosecutor, having finally agreed to interrogate Julian in the Ecuadorian embassy in London, begins interviews on 14th November 2016. And this is important too, because the entire time that the Swedish prosecutors were opening and closing this completely manufactured case against Julian Assange, Julian had made the point over and over and over and over that I'm not running from anything. I am perfectly willing to meet with anyone from Sweden, provided you meet me where I'm at, because you won't give me a guarantee that this isn't just a ruse so that I can get a black bag shoved over my head and taken to a CIA black site where I will then be tortured while I wait to go to kangaroo court in the Eastern District. And Sweden the entire time was like, yeah, we can't do that. So why don't you just come here? So it's finally after 5 years, this meeting took place. December, WikiLeaks releases 2,420 documents originating from various agencies of the German government, including the BND and Federal Office for the Protection of the Constitution.
Uh-oh.
Did we lose him?
I think we lost Steve.
Okay,
Oh, he's coming
Okay.
back.
one more time.
Okay, you're back.
He's back.
Hey.
What?
We had lost you for
You
a
dropped
second
out
there.
for about 20 seconds.
What?
You dropped out for 20 seconds.
Oh shit. Okay, my bad.
You're on the December part. You just finished the December part.
Okay. Well, groovy.
I can pick it up if you want.
Go for it. Yeah, because I don't know what the fuck's going on with my internet.
Yeah, 2017. March, WikiLeaks begins publishing Vault 7, detailing activities and capabilities of the U.S. Central Intelligence Agency to perform electronic surveillance and cyber warfare. The files include details on the scope and direction of the CIA's global covert hacking program, its malware arsenal, and software capabilities, such as the capabilities to compromise cars, smart TVs, web browsers, and operating systems of most smartphones, including the products of Apple's iPhone, Google's Android phone, and Microsoft's Windows phone, and even Samsung TVs, which can be turned into covert microphones.
Wait, can we stop for a second and just talk about this for 1 minute? Because this is a point I always like to make. This is March of 2017. Julian Assange is already, 5 years into being in the embassy. he's public enemy number one of the deep state, and he publishes Vault 7 any damn way. Like that's pretty crazy. Like he's already, pissed off a lot of really powerful people, and he's in a really precarious situation, and he publishes Vault 7 anyway. That's pretty dope if you think about it.
If I believe the timeline right too, in 2017 was around the time that Julian had his communications cut by the country of Ecuador multiple times, leading into 2018 as well. But to continue, in April of 2017, CIA Director Mike Pompeo calls WikiLeaks a hostile intelligence service and says we can no longer allow Assange and his colleagues the latitude to use free speech values against us. The Swedish authorities drop their investigation against Julian. This is May. However, he still faces arrest after he leaves the embassy building in London for breaching his former bail conditions in the UK when he entered the Ecuadorian embassy. September, the Russia spy files begin to be released in September 2017, consisting of over 650,000 critical documents relating to Russia under Vladimir Putin, including the releases of surveillance contractors in Russia. October 2017. CIA Director Mike Pompeo further describes WikiLeaks as an erroneous threat and states that the U.S. is working to take down the organization. December 2017, Julian is granted Ecuadorian citizenship. 2018, Julian's health deteriorates. Doctors examine him, call for him to be granted safe passage to a hospital. February, a UK judge rules that the arrest warrant against Julian should be maintained, meaning that he continues to face arrest if he leaves the Ecuadorian embassy. The ruling comes a day after it is revealed that the Swedish prosecutors attempted to close their investigation in 2013, but British prosecutors dissuaded them from doing so. March 2018. The new government in Ecuador unilaterally imposes new conditions on Julian that prevent him from having visitors and receiving phone calls and other electronic communications, permitting him only to meet with his lawyers. Numerous public officials issue statements in support of Julian, calling for Ecuador to #reconnect Julian and end his isolation. At least 4 open letters from civil society advocates around the world are sent to the Ecuadorian government, calling for an end to Julian's isolation conditions.
Let me jump in here real quick. Am I fucking up? Can you hear the?
No, you're fine.
Okay. Look at the timeline and in March of 2018, Julian's communications were so restricted that he could only meet with his lawyers. In March of 2018, he had already, the contract with Morales and UC Global and the CIA through Sheldon Adelson was already in full effect. So they were limiting his ability to communicate as a publisher, but they were still letting him speak to his lawyers so that they could record it. Now he's been able to see his lawyers once, twice in 6 months.
Mm-hmm.
Can you imagine being such a threat to the national security state that their only recourse is to remove entirely your ability to communicate with the outside world, including your fucking lawyers, for telling the truth about their war crimes and about their torture and about their fraud and about their abuse? Like that is so important to sink in and to get other people to understand that the reason that they've been propagandized to hate this man is because he allowed us to see who our government was. I'm done.
But to continue with this one, in March of 2018, it was later revealed that on March 8th, 2018, the process of moving Assange out of the Ecuadorian embassy began when the Ecuadorians made their first request to the UK, a letter asking for written assurance that the UK would not extradite Assange to a country where he could face the death penalty, according to the Ecuadorian Internal Minister, Maria Paula Romo. Ecuador's move to cut Julian's communications occur one day after a high-level U.S. military visit to Ecuador to discuss security cooperation. April, the U.S. and Ecuador signed a new military cooperation agreement. The Democratic National Committee files a lawsuit against the Russian government, the Trump campaign, and various individuals that allege to participate in a plot to hack its email servers and disseminate its contents during the 2016 election. The DNC also sues WikiLeaks for its role in publishing hacked material, though it does not allege that WikiLeaks participated in the hacking or knew about it in advance. Its sole role, according to the DNC's lawsuit, was publishing the hack emails. According to journalists Glenn Greenwald and Trevor Tim, writing for The Intercept, the DNC's lawsuit poses a serious threat to media freedom in the U.S. May, reports about Assange's stay in the Ecuadorian embassy begin in jeopardy.
Being in jeopardy.
Begin being in jeopardy mount. CNN reports the situation has become unusually bad and that Julian's refuge in the embassy may end any day now. A ruling from the Inter-American Court on Human Rights ruled that states granting asylum must provide safe passage to asylees and embassies, in effect stating that Ecuador's obligations in relation to Julian. June, U.S. Vice President Mike Pence visits Ecuador, where the case of Julian Assange is raised in a meeting with the Ecuadorian President Lenin Moreno. Before he visits, 10 Democratic senators send a letter to Pence urging him to address the issue at a time when WikiLeaks continues its efforts to undermine the democratic process globally. July, media reports suggest that the UK and Ecuador are seeking to reach high-level agreements to breach Julian's asylum by handing him over to the UK police to be arrested. September, Ecuador's ambassador to Germany sought a private emergency meeting in Berlin with the U.S. ambassador to Germany, Rick Grenell, viewed as one of President Donald Trump's closest envoys in Europe, said to mark Ecuador's direct outreach to the U.S. on Assange. October, Ecuador unilaterally imposes further restrictions on Julian in a new protocol. This includes explicit threats to revoke Julian's asylum if he or any visitors breach or perceive to breach any of the 28 rules in the protocol. The protocol forbids Julian from undertaking journalism and expressing his opinions under the threat of losing his asylum. The rules also state that the embassy can seize Julian's property and his visitors' property and hand these to the UK police and report visitors to the UK authorities. November 2018, U.S. prosecutors inadvertently revealed that Julian has been charged under a sealed confidential indictment in the U.S., something which WikiLeaks and others long claimed. The document making the admission was written by the Assistant U.S. Attorney Kelly S. Dwyer. The Wall Street Journal reports that over the past year, U.S. prosecutors have discussed several types of charges they could potentially bring against Mr. Assange. It notes that charges against Julian could include violating the U.S. Espionage Act, which criminalizes releasing information regarding U.S. national defense. The Guardian publishes a fabricated claim, and I believe still has on their website this fabricated claim, that Paul Manafort visited Julian Assange in the embassy in 2016. 6 U.S. congressmen published a letter to Secretary Mike Pompeo concerning his 26 November meeting with the foreign minister of Ecuador, specifically referencing the Manafort allegation.
I want to know what 6 those were and if they're members of the Senate Intelligence Committee, because they probably already knew that it was a fake story, and that's just another way that the relationship between intelligence agencies and their assets as Congress critters works to spread disinformation. If my internet's working all right. Oh,
fine.
and by the way, if you go to defend.wikileaks.org and look at this timeline, there are hyperlinks throughout. And as Andrew was talking about this new protocol that Ecuador imposed, you can click a link and it'll show you just how crazy and abso-fucking-lutely cartoonish this new protocol was, and that can only come from minds as deranged and perverted as our Central Intelligence Agency. Hey, Misty,
Yes.
could
Sorry,
you
I was muted.
could you pick up for
Yeah.
2019, please?
Yep. Absolutely. So January, we have the U.S. interrogates Ecuadorian diplomats, obtains documents on pretext of fabricated Manafort Assange meeting. In February, Ecuador inks a $4.2 billion financing deal with IMF. Chelsea Manning reveals subpoena to testify to WikiLeaks grand jury. In March, Chelsea Manning imprisoned for refusing to testify in WikiLeaks grand jury investigation. Met Police admits it collaborated with U.S. prosecutors since at least 2013 in WikiLeaks investigation. In April, Ecuador twists embarrassing INA papers into pretext to oust Assange. UN torture expert Nils Melzner urges Ecuador not to expel Assange from embassy. WikiLeaks uncovers spying operation on Assange. On 11 April 2019, Ecuador illegally revokes asylum and lets British police into the embassy, and Julian Assange is arrested as a U.S. extradition request and indictment are unsealed. Days later, FBI agents' affidavit in support of Assange arrest is unsealed. In May, the United Nations Working Group on Arbitrary Detention expressed concern about Assange proceedings. Sweden reopens investigation into Julian Assange, seeks to extradite. U.S. and Ecuador sign new agreement after Assange expelled, and subsequently, Ecuador hands over Assange's entire legal defense to the United States. Julian Assange, blah, 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 blah. Where are we at? Sorry, my computer just jumped a little. UN torture expert, collective persecution of Julian Assange must end now. In June, Swedish court blocks Swedish extradition from UK for time being, rejects prosecutors' detention request for Julian Assange. The UN torture expert, there's several links to different reports, briefs, all that stuff. There's the extradition hearing at Julian Assange's extradition hearing today at Westminster Magistrate Court in London, which Assange attended via video link from HMP Belmarsh. The full substantive proceedings were scheduled for 5 days in February 2020. Assange will also have a hearing in October this year. The DOJ tells Chelsea Manning it is investigating others in addition to Assange. MEPs urge Commission to halt Assange extradition to U.S. In July, El País, Spanish Securities, this is the UC Global stuff. Chelsea Manning's lawyer refutes conspiracy allegation against Julian Assange. Let's see. The UN Special Rapporteur on Torture, Nils Melzer, sends letters to the governments of the United States, United Kingdom, Ecuador, and Sweden to express that he is gravely concerned about Assange's treatment and to urge the latter three governments to ensure Assange is not extradited to the United States. Has he ever gotten a response from any of them yet?
No.
Do you guys know?
No.
No, I didn't think so. I was just checking, make sure I didn't miss something.
Last I heard him speak of it, he said no, I believe.
Yeah, that's what I thought, but I just wanted to make sure. That's pretty crazy. Let's see. Oh, the DNC's lawsuit against WikiLeaks is dismissed, with a judge noting that the publication of the DNC's emails is plainly of the type entitled to the strongest protection that the First Amendment offers. In August, the formal counsel to Ecuador and UK. There's another link if you want to go check those out. September, Julian Assange wins Compassion and Care's 2019 Gavin McFadden Award for whistleblowers. And then imprisoned activist Jeremy Hammond called against his will to testify before federal grand jury in the EDVA, likely against Assange and WikiLeaks. And that is where it ends. It ends it, I guess.
And that's only the third quarter of 2019. Yeah.
And we've had so much fuckery since, including the superseding indictment. And fuck, I mean, it's just when you see it all laid out like that, year after year after year after year, hopefully it gives you an idea of the scope of this thing. And I really do believe that it's a decent resource that you'll be able to incorporate should you find yourself on the defensive in a conversation about Julian's case.
I think it outlines the Swedish allegations really well too. And that in and of itself is probably worth pulling out and putting in to just a little section all by itself, because that basically blows all the holes in how they actually got this bullshit bail charge to get Julian into the UK prisons to begin with.
Well, and really, this isn't even like a completely comprehensive timeline. I mean, there's a lot. I'm kind of obsessive about it a little bit. There's like the kind of decade-long team effort of multiple governments to destroy this one human being. I've kind of like gotten obsessive about like looking at it and like there's a lot, you guys. It's a lot of like little things, stuff that they say in the media that they'll, push for a cycle or whatever. And it gets into the public consciousness, and it's like this propaganda smear campaign that's been going. It's really kind of fascinating. It's like depressing and horrifying and terrifying, but it's kind of fascinating. Like they have really gone all out for a decade, multiple different governments teamed up. I mean, to really destroy this one human being. And that's pretty fucked up. I mean, And
Niels Melzer really sums it up best when he says that he has never seen so-called liberal democracies behave in such a way to attack one man. Do we want to cover a little bit more, or do we want to start wrapping up for the evening?
We're like 15 minutes over right now, so we might as well.
Okay. Well, I would like to thank everybody for joining us and watching this evening. A special thank you to Daniel and Fee for joining us. I think that was a wonderful interview that we got to do with both of them together. I would like to point everybody to that Reddit AMA that happened. There is still archives of it floating around. I believe Daniel has some up on his Twitter. And I just want to thank Misty. I want to thank Steve, Josh, Kimber, and everyone behind the scenes organizing for DC, and everyone that helped us meet our goal. We are still keeping the fundraiser up, but there are a lot of other fundraisers out there right now for Julian as well, including the billboard van for DC, as well as Stella Morris's fundraiser, specifically to help the legal team. So I just really appreciate everybody. And if you like what you see, you can follow us on Twitter at action_4 Assange. You can find us online at action4Assange.com as well.
Do the jazz hands.
You have to. I was just going
with feeling, Smith. With feeling.
Dude, how are you going to not do it? Like, how are you going to not do it? What the hell?
Look at him. He's blushing.
I am blushing.
Thing in the whole world. Well, I mean, but it's one of my favorite things in the whole world. It makes me happy. And don't take it away from me, Andrew. Don't take it away.
Live action trolling.
I'll bring it back for Saturday in its full glory.
Can't take that away from me. It's one of the few things that brings me joy anymore. Seriously. Anyway, I'm Misty. You can find me on Twitter at Sarcasm Stardust. I have a show called Facts on the Ground on YouTube. We're going to be filming an episode this week. So yeah, check that out if you guys want to. Thank you guys for having me on. Thank you to Fee and Daniel. Though, you know, I think that was a good conversation. But yeah, that's about it. Just thanks for having me on, guys.
My name's Steve Boykin, and I have a show called Slow News Day. If you're looking for it on YouTube, you can find it by typing in Slow News Day Podcast into your search bar. I'm also on the Rockfin and D Live. Huge thanks to tonight's guests, Daniel Burke and Fiorella Isabel, and my co-hosts, Misty and Jazz Andrew. And big thanks to Sleepy Josh and the Mean Pandas. Man, it's been a fucking seriously weird week, y'all. Like, really fucking weird. But I've got cool stuff to look at. Like, that's right out my window right there. Some nice California mountains. Sort of breathable air. So that's helpful. And I don't think my house is on fire yet, so I'm pretty stoked about that. So all in all, you know, it could be much worse. Thanks to everyone who's like reached out to me throughout this too, and like just checked in. It's been a bunch of you guys here in the chat, and a handful of our fellow content creators. So it's really appreciated. We'll see you Saturday. I may see you sooner. I'm thinking about maybe doing some live streams during the day here if it's not too fucking hot. But until then, good luck to us all.